Right. My understanding is that the market is different in the rest of the country. We are looking, when we look in our micro market, and it's not so micro because we cover a pretty good area, we are very much in a seller's market. What's typical here is a listing will go on Thursday or Friday towards the end of the week. It'll stay on through the weekend. And then by Monday or Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, they're looking at multiple offers and see where yours is. So you really need to be prepared to jump in.
Dave Steinberg, and welcome to the Mortgages Made Easy podcast. I have known Jodi Boxer for 20 years, something like that. And we just had the opportunity today to be working with the same client, really pretty randomly. A young man that I've known for close to 25, maybe 30 years, came to me for a mortgage and went to Jodi as a realtor. And so during this exchange, what I wanted to talk about was what advice you would give Jodi for someone who is looking to buy a home in 2020.
Okay, so I guess I'll start with, if you're a buyer in this market, just hold on to your hat. It's a crazy market to be a buyer in. So the biggest piece of advice I could say is just be prepared. And that really, honestly, like we always say, but even more so now, think about what you can do and know what you're able to do. So start with the mortgage process. That I don't mean this to be so self-serving because you're a mortgage broker, but honestly, if you don't know what your parameters are, it's really impossible. So we do have to start with the mortgage process. It's so important to know what your parameters are. So in a normal market, I would normally say you need to know if you're looking in a price range and you don't even know what your pre-approval level is. You don't know whether you could stretch and reach a little bit higher, or you don't want to get into the process down the road where you've been looking and then find out you could only afford less. And now everything in comparison is not going to look so great, right? Now in this market, it's really, we are in such an extreme seller's market, the most extreme. And I know we said the most extreme last year, and this is just diabolical extreme. So
let's just clarify that your core market is, let's say, Stamford and a 20-mile radius around Stamford. Is that about right?
So really, like those commuting distances to New York, those commuting distances to New York City. We cover Greenwich, Stamford, further up the line, but we also go into Westchester as well. Our core business is in the lower Fairfield County, lower Connecticut, but we do spread into New York as well.
And what I'm hearing you say, and I've been hearing this now for several months, for so many people, this is, there's just a strong seller's market. And that is different than the conversations people are having in the rest of the country.
Right. My understanding is that the market is different in the rest of the country. We are looking, when we look in our micro market, and it's not so micro because we cover a pretty good area, we are very much in a seller's market. What's typical here is a listing will go on Thursday or Friday towards the end of the week. It'll stay on through the weekend. And then by Monday or Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, they're looking at multiple offers and see where yours is. So you really need to be prepared to jump in as quickly as you can.
So let's talk about what it means to be prepared, because again, we're this young man that we're both serving.
Mhm.
You know, we had an amazing conversation. So let me just summarize the conversation. Because after I prepared a pre-approval, you called me up and you asked me some questions. You asked me if uh, yesterday we looked at a pre-approval and we came in at 485, and you said, can we go any higher? So today we went up to 560. And then the next thing that happened was you asked me if, um, so this young man raised his offer from 485 to 515. And then you said, what can he do with the appraisal? So if the appraisal comes in lower than his offer, can he absorb um,
The gap.
the gap? And for our listeners, it's clear that's why you want to work with a Jodi, not just a realtor off the street. You know, I say this in almost every podcast. You pay the same thing when you work with the cream of the crop, the people with great experience who are master negotiators, as you do with people on their first transaction. And you have to be crazy not to hire the Jodis of the world and Jodi Boxer. And
Thank you. Thank you. I
um,
appreciate that. So,
so yeah,
you
so
know,
let's talk about that dialogue. What's your thought process as you prepare your buyer to make an offer?
so in this market, however you could lessen those contingencies in your offer, the better you're going to be in the outcome. It may, sometimes we don't even, the seller might not accept the highest offer, but they might accept an offer with the fewest contingencies. So of course, if you could pay cash, awesome, right? That would be great, but not, most people can't. Most people need, or even if you could get a mortgage, but you don't have to have a mortgage contingency, that is also awesome. But not most buyers can't do that, but you would be amazed at how many who can, but most can't. So
Why don't we talk about that? What do you have in mind when you say you don't need a mortgage contingency?
So for example, let's just say somebody's buying a property, whether it's, let's just say $1 million, just to keep the numbers around. And I don't know where your audience is on this. This one that we were talking about was a $500,000 deal, but let's just say you're buying something for $1 million. If somebody's putting down $500,000 or $600,000 and they're only taking out percentage wise a small mortgage, and they know that they will qualify for the mortgage, they may not need the mortgage contingency in the contract. So we have to review the circumstances on what their personal circumstances on whether they can do that. But if their mortgage is small enough and they know they're going to be approved, don't put the onus on the sellers to wait for you to get your final approval. Dave, you often go through a process where you're approving somebody practically before they even buy something. So if they're that close to approval, can we release a mortgage contingency? Maybe. But when a buyer can do that, it's a really good thing to do. I always explain in layman's terms, and forgive me, you're the mortgage broker. In layman's terms, there are two parts to the mortgage. One is whether somebody is qualified to get the mortgage. A banker is going to lend you money. And the other side is the bank wants to know that if they're lending you money, they want to know that the property is worth it, so that they appraise the property. So we look at, if somebody can't release the whole mortgage, if they're not paying cash and they can't release the mortgage contingency, can they be flexible on either of those fronts? So we talked with the client today. They need a mortgage. They need a mortgage in order to buy this property, and they need to go through the mortgage approval process. Because they're putting down more than 20%, they could cover a bigger gap in where that property appraises. We've had an incredible increase in prices here. So there's a lag between the comps of sold properties and the properties that are on the market and selling for even higher amounts today. So there's a lag in information. So if the buyer could cover the gap, if they're putting down enough money where they could at least cover the gap if the appraisal doesn't come out at the full value, that's really helpful. And that really is helpful from a seller's point of view, because they don't have to accept a cash offer, but they could accept your offer because they don't have to worry about whether or not the property appraises at full value.
Now, let's go back to our young man for a minute, and let me walk you through my thought process here. Again, using my terms now rather than your terms, but there's two sides to the equation. There is the credit side, and so they need to be credit approved, and then they need to be property approved. And as far as I'm concerned, our young man can waive the credit approval, and he can waive it for two reasons. Number one, he's going to get approved. Now, he'll get approved within probably 24 hours of preparing, of getting the offer accepted. So you'll present us with an unsigned contract. We can submit it to the bank, and 24 hours later, you'll have the credit approved. So they can waive that part of the contingency with some, without really a lot of angst. The second part, which is the appraisal contingency. Now, you have to have someone who's brave, but let's take our young man. It went on the market at 485. I don't think there's any way conceivable that that property will appraise for less than 450.
Of course.
Is that true? Now, let's say we were talking today about a 515 offer. So that's a $65,000 gap, right? And that's absolute worst case. If you have a client who is committed to the property, then we can counsel them together that, yeah, you can make it non-contingent. And if your down payment is big enough, you may not even need an appraisal. But even if you need an appraisal, we're getting you approved based on 25% down. Okay, so you're paying let's just use 520 because it's easy. You're going to pay 520, you're going to borrow 390, 75% of 520. Well, even if it appraised at 450, which is virtually inconceivable, they would still get approved for the mortgage. They would still get approved for the mortgage because if it's worth 550 and they're borrowing it's worth 450 and they're borrowing 390, they're still at 90% or better. And therefore, if you have an aggressive client in that situation, together we can strategize and look at waiving that as a contingency and be far more aggressive than many other buyers might be in the same situation. It's still not a cash offer, but we can be way more aggressive than the average bear. What other contingencies do you talk about?
The inspection contingency.
Okay.
Do you want me to talk a little bit more about
sure.
that? So with the inspection contingency, certainly for first-time home buyers, I do always want them to do an inspection. If nothing else, they need to learn how a house runs, right? So even if they could fix things like this young man can, he still needs to know how a house runs, and he still needs to find out what's going on in the house. And so how the
systems are.
So now you have some people who are really good around the house and some people who have been homeowners before and know how to do things. And sometimes they'll say, I did have one last week where the buyer came in with no inspection at all. They said, we're going to pay cash and we're going to do no inspection. So literally from acceptance to signed contract is a matter of a few days, and then the deal is done. Sometimes what we do is we'll say, we'll have an inspection contingency, but we're not even going to discuss any items that are less than $2,500. So if it's a it's some electrical work that needs to be done or some plumbing, you need a plumber for a couple of hours or an electrician for a couple of hours, that's going to be on the buyers. But if it's a buried oil tank or a roof that's leaking or some of the big stuff is really, really what you want covered. So we might we might say that up to a certain amount, we're not going to even discuss it with the sellers. Other pieces of the inspection, I'm just thinking how to make the inspection contingency a little bit lighter. Sometimes we say, look, we're doing an inspection for informational purposes. As a listing agent, I don't love that because I always feel like if they say we're doing it for informational purposes, it implies that you're not going to bring anything up to the seller. But I find that in those cases, it's for informational purposes until they have the information, and then they're going to bring it up to the sellers. But by that time, the deal is accepted and the seller may need to discuss it with them. So I take that one with a grain of salt. But we try to minimize what we're going. I do let the buyers know that in this market, and this is certainly local to our area, as much as you could be flexible on those things, you need to be flexible on those things as a buyer in this market.
But what I'm finding, I serve 4 markets. I serve Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Florida. And in every one of my markets, I'm having the same conversation. In the Westchester market, in the Bergen County, New Jersey market, in the Fairfield market, in South Florida, having the same conversation because there are, in all of those markets, there's a lot of demand. One of the things that I try to tell my clients to be flexible about is how fast they're prepared to close.
How fast to close? Well, I think what I always ask before we submit the offer, I always ask what the seller's looking for, right? What is their preferred closing date? So could we talk about the rent back? We talked about this with this current offer. In this case, the sellers are closing on another property on July 10th. They really do want to close before that, and they'd like to keep occupancy. In this area, we tend to close and occupy at the same time. So we offered them the option of closing 2 weeks earlier and giving them 2 weeks free rent at the house, 2 weeks free occupancy. And that, just another bonus to them that hopefully will make our offer stand out.
And I love it because now what you've done is you've taken an average offer and you built it up by reducing the mortgage contingency. You've built in flexibility about inspection. You've designed the offer to meet the seller's need. And in a seller's market, that's what you have to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. This exercise with this, I hope it's more than an exercise, but what we did with this buyer today was a typical example of just pull out as many stops as you possibly can. I don't know that we're the highest offer, but I do think we will stand out on the terms of our offer.
Yeah, that's great. Now, we've been talking about this as being a seller's market. What I find in talking to my clients is that there are a lot of buyers who are just ready to buy. And they're ready to buy, and that's why it's a seller's market, because there are a lot of buyers ready to buy. People buy for a variety of reasons. New children, they're either upsizing or downsizing, right? Last week it was all my kids are off to college and I don't need as big a house. I'm working with one in Albany, in the Albany area, and these people have both got new jobs and they have to move from Arizona to Albany, but they're moving for employment. And when you get a new job, you got to move. Some people are moving for new children, a growing family. And so there's this dynamic. And even though you might say, oh, I wish you didn't have to buy now, but you only get to act in the market that you live in.
Mhm.
How about, is this a good time to sell? And if the market is growing, if the sellers are seeing price increases, and I imagine if I had a house around the corner from you in Stamford, and why would I want to sell today?
So you can't time the top of the market and you can't time the bottom of the market, right? So we have had incredible increases. And we're not necessarily at the top of the market, but we don't know that. We don't know that until we're starting to come down. Now, if you're a seller in this market, it's not only a great time to sell because the market has increased so much, because inventory is so low, we have a lot of desperate buyers. So I'll give you an example. There was a house that I put on the market for, before we put it on the market, we were discussing the price range of $1.3 million. They needed time to spruce up their house, get it ready, and get in the mindset to get it ready. They called me several months later and I said, yeah, I think you're probably $1.35 million to $1.4 million now. And they said, you know what, we're good at $1.35 million. Let's put it on for $1.35 million. Within a weekend, we had offers we had probably about 8 offers between $1.4 million and $1.45 million. Okay, amazing. Because now there are buyers who've now lost out on other properties, and they're now in the mode of, they're a little bit more desperate, right? So they're saying, you know what, I'm going to go above asking price. And that is typical, where your asking price is just the start of where people are going to springboard off of. Anyway, there was one buyer who then said, no, wait, don't accept anything yet. We're going to come in with a really good offer. And I thought, okay, where are they going to come in? Maybe $1.45 million or $1.5 million. They came in at $1.6 million, $250,000 over asking price, right? Cash. It was an amazing cash, close quickly. We're out. So the buyers were thrilled because they got a house because they've lost out on so many others. The sellers were thrilled. They got $250,000 over ask. Okay. So now if you're a seller in this market where it's not only rising prices, but now you have so many buyers out there who are willing to go 100,000 or 10%, let's say 10% or 15%, or sometimes even more over asking price. You might have that one or two, or even 3 outliers who are going to really springboard pretty high off of where you are. Now, what we're finding is it doesn't necessarily mean you could ask 20% more. If I had listed that house for $1.6 million, I think I would have gotten very little reaction at all. And then if you have the one house that's sitting on the market when nothing else is sitting on the market, everybody wonders what's wrong with it. So everybody expects in this market that the properties are going to go within a week. And so you don't want to price it too high, but the market makes that adjustment. The market tells you where the value is because that's where the buyers come in at.
Yeah. And that's the difference between someone with integrity, a realtor with integrity, because you can imagine 4 realtors went up to this property and try to convince them to list with him or her. And now some of them probably said, let's list at $1.5 million. Let's miss this knowing the market psychology, knowing the market timing. And what I know about you after all these years is the credibility that you bring, because having a great realtor is something of enormous value. And specifically, what I'd say is, I'll just go to my Albany deal for a minute. I'm an unknown quantity in Albany. I don't do a lot of business in that county, but the realtor said she knows me. She trusts me, and she told the other realtor that if I said something's good, it's good. Now, that's all about the credibility. How long have you been a realtor?
Way long. Over
Well,
over 20 years. But also, Dave, I want to say in this, I love the partnerships that realtors and mortgage brokers have, right? This was like a joint effort between you and me and the buyer. What can we all do? I don't want to tell a buyer that they need to pull out all the mortgage stops without confirming what you know, right? So it's really important to have that partnership and having all partners who you trust and can work with. So thank you for helping us today.
I call it the dream team. And the hashtag for this on Facebook will be dream team, because
Good.
when I'm working with someone and we'll have an attorney involved who is who is pre-vetted,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll have an inspector who's pre-vetted, and to the extent that you can have a team of people, all of whom work together like clockwork, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, you're just going to have a great experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, Jodi,
Yes.
what's your superpower?
What's my superpower? Besides in the kitchen, when I could figure out the right things that go in the right container and figure out the right amount, professionally, look, we love working with our clients. What's my superpower? Okay, I'll thank you. I wasn't prepared for that question, but I'll tell you what I think we do really well. We like to find the nuances in the deal to our client's advantage. So I know it sounds old time, but I don't like to negotiate through text messages or emails. I like to listen. I like to hear that when I'm submitting an offer and I'm trying to read between the lines and trying to get some intel, what will make our offer stand out. I can't do that when it's in black and white. When I submit an offer, or when I talk about submitting an offer and I say, hey, we're planning to submit an offer of X, I want to hear them say, I don't want to see it in writing, well, okay, thanks. I want to hear whether it's in, okay, thanks, or an, okay, thanks, that's great, right? I really want to hear, I want to hear in between the lines. So I really try to take those the nuances of what I've heard and try to figure out where we really, really need to be, and where we have to be and where we're willing to go, both on the buyer end and the seller end.
Got it. And tell me a little bit about your team. I guess I haven't been in touch with you in a while.
Yeah. So right now, I'm always looking for talent. So if there's anybody on this call who wants to be, it doesn't have to just be in an agent position. I'm always looking for people for staffing, and I'm always also looking for agents and can help any agents who want to get into the business or agents out there who want to build their business. Right now, my team is me. I have a small team. It's me, a virtual assistant in the Philippines, and I have a great agent on my team, Jessica Buckley. And we are a really good partnership.
Right. And what are you passionate about other than work?
Other than
Work. Other than work. What are you
other than
passionate
work, honestly, family. That's really important to me. My time with them is really key. What I can do with them and for them, it's important to me.
And tell me about your family.
Oh, I've got 3 daughters. One is married with children. One just recently got married, and then another one is married with 3 grandchildren. And I managed to find them a house across the street from me.
How did that happen?
In this market where there's nothing available, where there's no inventory, nothing. I don't know. It's a miracle. It's a miracle, but they live across the street. So that's amazing.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So we're going to take a pause for a minute. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Um, I think we've pretty much covered. I'm sure I'll think about something later.
Okay.
Right. And honestly, right now my mind is on this offer and I've gotten a couple of text messages. So I'm good.
Okay.
Would love to
So,
regroup another time. Yeah.
let's close it down.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we'll close this one down. We'll take a minute and
And
we'll talk about
and
stuff.
and on the other side, is there anything you want me to specifically say?
We're good. We're
Okay.
good. This has been great because it's really a conversation, and
Yeah.
there are times that I have to say, "Dummy," here.
Yeah, I know.
It's
I'm
been a
good.
really flowing conversation.
Yeah.
Jodi, thank you so much for joining on the Mortgages Made Easy podcast. I so much value your wisdom and your you're just such a thought leader in the real estate market, and your integrity just shines through. And if anyone watches this is looking to buy in the Stanford South Fairfield County market, I can't speak highly enough of Jodi Boxer.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much. And it's really a pleasure working with you as well. Thanks, Dave.
Hi, this is Dave Steinberg and the Mortgages Made Easy podcast. Jodi Boxer and I were having a conversation about what people should know today, April 2023, about the Fairfield County, Connecticut market. What's going on in the market?
So here we are on April 18th. Because we're all, things could change at any time. Things could get better, things could get worse, we are in a diabolical seller's market. We have no inventory. If you're a buyer, we really need to pull out all stops.
Okay, so let's stop and let's do this. I understand what you're trying to say, but if I was listening to this, I would say, so let's say we're in a seller's market and therefore you have to be strategic, right?
Okay.
As opposed to, when you say diabolic, you say, okay, so start all over again. We're going to hit it again.
So we're in a seller's market. You need to be strategic, whether you're a seller or a buyer.
Yeah. So let's start from scratch, because you'll get a flow.
Okay.
Here you're interrupting your flow. Sorry about this, Aaron. We're going to start all over again. Hi, this is Dave Steinberg. We're joined today with Jodi Boxer on the Mortgages Made Easy podcast. And Jodi and I were talking about what you need to know about the Fairfield County market mid-April 2023.
Okay, so in this market that we're in right now, you need to be strategic, both as a seller and as a buyer. As a seller, we help guide you through what needs to be done to make your house stand out with other houses, but not only stand out, but make it the house that the buyers are all going to be running after. As a buyer, we really want to make sure that we are strategic in how we plan your offer and how we get your offer to rise to the top of the pile.
Tell us a little bit more about the sellers. What should sellers know?
Okay, so many times we walk into homes and, if sometimes the biggest thing they need to do is declutter, and everything else. They might have updates in their house, which are great. Lots of times they don't. So lots of times there hasn't been work done to the house for a long time, but we like to at least go in there and make sure that the house sparkles as much as it possibly can. If we could have the sellers put a fresh coat of paint on, that's great. Or if we could, sometimes the floors need to be redone. We have people who could help with that. We like to make sure the windows are clean. Sometimes people haven't cleaned their windows in years. It really makes a difference when people walk into a house and the sunlight just sparkles through. So just little things like that with an eye on what the buyers are looking for. I know there's not much on the market, but most buyers do want a house that they feel like they could at least move into. And then even if they need to do work, they could do work along the way, but they really want it to be as clean as possible. They want to at least be able to see a clean palette.
And if you're talking to a buyer today, what's your advice?
My buyers, for buyers today, I think they really do. We try to get them to understand where the market really is. Sometimes it takes a buyer 2 or 3, or sometimes more offers where they lose out on deals before they realize that they need to pull out all stops. Sometimes it's hard to get a buyer to understand that before they've submitted offer number 1. We try to do that as much as we possibly can.
We've been sitting with Jodi Boxer. She is one of the best realtors I know in the Fairfield County market. And boy, Jodi, thanks so much for joining us. This is the Mortgage Made Easy podcast. Jodi's information will be posted below. My information. If you have any questions about mortgages, give me a call. Reach out to me, and Jodi is prepared to take your calls and your questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.